Hi guys. So, hello everyone. Really, we, as the title says, talking about how our agencies are benefiting from PropTech. But what we really wanted to talk about together is sort of the journey through embedding PropTech into our agencies. So, how we go about assessing need within our businesses and assessing the opportunities available to us, and then the process going through that. So, John, start with you next to me. How do you, as Life Residential, how do you guys sort of assess sort of a need for solutions?
I think we're inundated with the need for solutions, but what we're finding is that when we come across people that have got a solution that they feel is right for us, they often show us things that we never even realised, you know. So we have to evaluate, firstly, do we need it? Is it a luxury? Is it a problem that you're actually solving, or is it just a gimmick? And there seems to be a lot of gimmicks out there at the moment. We've got to be good enough with the staff that we have to work out, actually, we can use this. It's been nigh on impossible in the sort of 20 odd years that I've been doing it to actually spot a problem and go out and find that digital solution.
Okay. I mean, interestingly, from our perspective, so it says up on the screen the Depositary, which is something we're doing new, but I'm an agency owner myself, a single branch, independent, and we apply a lot of PropTech within our business. Now, one of the things that we do to sort of assess that need for ourselves, we're a small company, it's very easy for us to do, is we sit down once a year, typically tail end of the year, and I will spend time talking with each of my staff individually about their specific role and their specific experience within that role. And then after that, we'll sit down as a company and we'll discuss really where the sort of frustrations are as an individual within the role. What is it about their role that they really don't like, truth be told, on a day-to-day basis? And also, sort of potentially, more importantly, but sort of on the same level, is in terms of our tenants and landlords, as we're primarily a lettings agent, where the friction points are there. Debbie, do you find you do sort of a similar system, or?
Yeah, in Andrews, it's been very much a case of we get lots of approaches for different tech, and didn't have anybody dedicated necessarily to do that until I've put into the role. So my job has been to look at processes in the business and look where we can see efficiencies, or also for the customer journey to enhance and improve the customer journey, because we accept that actually as a business that's organically grown over the years, some of the systems and things that you have, whilst we've got a bespoke platform, there's bits of things that actually we can't do, or actually we haven't got the time or maybe the resources to actually do that. So if you can take something off the shelf, and the most important thing for us was about people that could API integration. That's one of the most, I think our head of IT first of all said to me, anything you look at, ask them if they integrate. If they don't, then it's, you know, that's something that you might steer away from. So unless it was something that could stand alone on its own type of thing. So my job was to really look at the things that were there. Also look at as you've said, like the pain points in the business, either from a customer point of view or from the staff point of view. So where were those? Where were the hiccups, that customer journey not being particularly smooth? And that's when you can actually see where there might be things there. But a bit like Jonathan said, quite often you go out and you don't actually know the problem until you actually see something and somebody does put something in front of you and you think, oh, actually that could solve something that we didn't even know existed, but it could enhance something even further.
And then, Russell, obviously you take a slightly different approach to us in terms of, obviously, a lot of your tech is self-built, self-developed. So how do you sort of assess how you're evolving that and how you're adding new features?
So in fact, all of our tech is built in-house, so that we don't plug much in yet. Not that we're necessarily alien to that, but otherwise pretty much everything, certainly the platform itself is self-built, is proprietary. I guess our approach is different in that rather than coming across solutions and then working out if there's a problem that solution applies to, we are perpetually brainstorming. In fact, we did it over lunch. My team here, we've had some, Austin here's had a great couple of ideas over lunch as a consequence of seeing some of the people here. So we're brainstorming all the time. I think, and I know this sounds obvious, but in my sector I don't think it is, that domain experience is really, really important in terms of absolutely understanding the user journey throughout, in our case, the sales process. And the reason I think that probably sounds odd is because you would imagine that in my sector, online hybrid estate agents have domain experience. Actually, most really don't. So I think the fact that we have that edge in terms of lots and lots of years experience as estate agents allows us to understand what the customer wants and doesn't want. So to that point, we listen to the customer. Very importantly, we listen to our staff, so the guys that are on support, the guys that are on our offers and sales progression team. We genuinely listen to them in terms of what they want to see deployed, improved, and so on. So it really starts with us understanding the business, and then of course testing in terms of how some of those things work. Which sometimes, of course, is counter to what we thought it might be. But I guess we'll come on to that, yeah.
So I think one of the things that's good to touch on is something we were talking about in the room just before, is placing a value on these solutions, right? So I think every single PropTech company here will face this frustration of pitching products to agents and very quickly coming up with that question of, what am I getting? What's my return on investment? What am I getting for this? And whether you're looking at a small agent that's looking to squeeze those margins, or whether you're looking at a large corporate with a corporate structure that's very financially minded. We were all talking about how really, particularly at the moment, we need to move away per se from necessarily quite such clinical financial terms of the rewards of it, and really look more about how we're evolving as an agency, how we're evolving as an industry. How do you guys feel about that, John?
It's impossible to put a value on it. And so the way we've looked at it is, can you afford not to have it? A few years ago, we found we were losing staff because they were going to agencies that had the better software that was making their lives better. So if it's something that we can look at this product and say, really, it's the right thing to do is to be using and testing this. And you'll know, your staff will know, you're then making a much better workplace for them, and you're doing your best for your clients. So you're telling your clients, look, we've got a solution that we're working on at the moment. If it does work, great, but they want to see you innovating. If you start looking at it saying, well, what money is that going to put in my bank account at the end of the year? Forget it. And that's the problem with some of the large agencies at the moment, is that they're working on budgets, they're working on profit bonus targets, and they'll never get them into place. Whereas if you're smaller and nimble, you've got a chance to say, our team think we should give this a go. Then that's the only way to do it at the moment.
Well, I think on the flip side as well, right? You're talking about larger organisations. My company's small, team of 5. We look after a portfolio of about 200 properties. So, the financial returns aren't necessarily there, but for us, it's about creating that consumer engagement, that consumer experience, but also that work experience as well. Yeah. Like I said, we talk about the friction points for a job. We want to keep our staff coming in every day, and we want them waking up in the morning, not dreading what's waiting for them in the inbox.
But it's CPD. Yeah. It's what we should be doing as business owners and business directors. We're the ones that are not going on these training courses, and this way of getting involved with PropTech companies just to test it out, that is our CPD. That's how we grow and learn.
So I'm gonna jump over to a question on here, and before I do, I'm just going to say, guys, we really want this conversation to really be what the room wants to get out of it. So please take advantage of Slido. If you don't already know it, log on to slido.com, hashtag PropTech18, Resi Stage, and please post questions, because we're happy to this is a very loose, transitional sort of conversation about the PropTech journey. We've tried to have an array of us representing different areas of the market here, so hopefully we can give you insight from different perspectives. So do please get questions up here, and thumbs up to ones that you like on here. But straight away, where do I start as an agent to learn about tech? I have no idea what tech I should be using. So I mean, obviously we've just sort of slightly
Yeah.
touched on that. Debbie, do you want to?
Yeah, actually, I come from, my background is from the letting side of the business, and I practiced it day to day, and then I came into this role, and I didn't really know much about tech. I've got the benefit of IT and marketing people to be able to, that've got quite techie backgrounds that give me that sort of go into the detail of things. But what I've done is very much read and research, come to these type of events, get talking to people, get talking to other agents to find out what's worked for them, how it's worked, where it hasn't worked, what you've tested, etc. And then dug into things a lot deeper. And as you learn more as you go as well. So the more questions you start asking, the more newsletters you subscribe to and that sort of thing. Then James's newsletter is great on a Sunday. So, it opens your eyes to things that you might not see because we're Bristol based and a lot of it tends to be very London centric, where the startups are. So you've got to get yourself out there and look and see what's right for you, what's right for your business. Because you can start off looking for one thing, and actually, I came across Good Lord as a result of looking for a different reference provider. So I've just thought I was looking for a reference provider, but actually, I could see then that there was a lot more that could happen, and how then I can actually evolve that in the business. And actually, it was an opportunity because we're a business that's been around for a while, for quite a long time. We could actually relook at our processes and start again. And I think that's the main thing I would say to people, that if you are looking at tech, look at how it could completely change what you do, rather than try and fit the tech around what you do. It's actually taking the time to actually sit down and almost rip up your process and write from a scrap of piece of paper. Which if you were a startup, you would do that. So it's a bit harder to do when you're an existing company.
Well, I think one of the challenges as well now,
do.
right, is 2-3 years ago when many of us are trying to drive this, it was, compared to now, a limited choice of what's out there. And so I think one of the challenges that face agents now is that there is this seemingly ever-growing spectrum of solutions and opportunities out there. And, I think that in itself can be quite overwhelming about which is the right solution.
I think one of my messages would be that just because automation can kind of do everything throughout the process, whether it's sales or lettings, and it kind of technically can. I mean, you can automate certainly the estate agency process from start to finish, particularly when it comes to messaging between buyers and sellers and so on. What we learned very, very early on was that that's the wrong thing to do. So what we effectively did was to split the estate agency transaction process, literally from inquiry through listing, viewing feedback, offers, checking mortgage provenance, chain checking, the whole thing. Worked out what those milestones looked like, and then very importantly actually looked kind of with fresh eyes in terms of what should be automated and what should not be automated. So the audience might be quite interested to know that we have hardly automated the offer negotiation, chain checking and financial position process at all. So we're still actually, even though we're a hybrid agent, we're still very, very manual in terms of doing those things, because frankly there is no technology in our opinion that can check a chain with Winkworths who have sold through someone that sold through Foxtons and so on. The same when it comes to checking cash, checking mortgage AIPs and so on. So what we started with was, I guess, what we'd call the heavy lifting. So the things that are actually the boring, repetitive parts of the estate agency process, so particularly around price reductions. Now, we used to get in on a Monday morning and have 50, 60, 70 emails from customers saying, can you reduce my price £500, please? Can you reduce my price £800, please? So we automated it, and now we don't have those calls, because if someone wants to change their price at 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning, they literally log into their platform, change the price, it clicks confirm, and it's done, and then it appears on the portals 30 seconds later. Then we moved on to viewings, for instance. So viewings now, we've automated. We've taken 80% of the cost because we've taken 80% of the labour out of our viewing process. So we've almost entirely automated viewings. And actually, when we started doing this, what was very, very evident is that the customer loved it. So there may be agents in the room thinking, well, actually, we want to be in the middle of that viewing. You have to ask yourself why. Why on earth, as a negotiator, do you want to be taking a call from Mrs. Smith, ringing Mr. Jones 6 times and leaving messages and playing telephone tag, inconveniencing your viewer as a consequence of that, and basically tying up a member of staff on X pounds an hour just by way of there being this kind of telephone rigmarole. So we automated that. So we now have 6 people dealing with about 4,000 viewings a month. That's it. So we've reduced costs by about 80%. And importantly, the consumer loves it.
Right. So there's a question here that's sort of rumped to the top here, and I think it's a really good one. So what tech have you found most beneficial to your own agency? I mean, from a personal perspective, I can think of 2. I'm going to save one for later, for a question I want to raise for you guys later. But I think for us, we're primarily a lettings and management company. We look after about 200 tenancies, about 150 of those managed, and we very much pitch ourselves at the high end of the service scale. And what we've found that has benefited that facilitation most is Property File, which we access through the Zoopla suite. We're a Dupix client, and Property File is something that actually early doors when Dupix was an independent, we were very much involved with the early development of that when I think it was eProperty File as a landlord portable, and then it then became My Property File. But we've definitely seen that benefit our agency hugely. Probably 60 to 70% of our managed landlords are scattered all over the globe. So there's the time zone complication of comms and access to data. So that ability for them to have a single login, access their whole portfolio, and access the last 3 years of key data for their whole portfolio at the click of a button on any device is great. And the addition of the tenant app now the tenant app for us doesn't actually just work managing a tenancy. Within that tenancy app, they've got access to their documents, they've got a live rent ledger, which is, when it comes time to moving on, is a really nice little tool for a tenant to have. But also that ability to report a maintenance issue through an app and get live updates, push notifications through that app as it's progressed. We now actively, whenever we're showing a managed property, that's also a marketing tool. If we do a viewing and that viewing's going well, part of that viewing will be showing these guys the app, showing these guys, this is the experience you'll get with us when you move into the property. This is how you interact with us. This is how you use our agency. So that's probably the biggest bit of PropTech that's influenced us as an agency. How about you guys? Jump.
Well, the one that's changed our business completely for the angle of the tenant and the landlord is Goodlord, without a shadow of a doubt. We've been using that for over 3.5 years. It's changed our business dramatically. But in terms of the negotiator and the agent's point of view, that's certainly helped. But we've been using KeyNest, and that's taken away the key problem that we've got in the 4,500 odd properties that we look after. It's taken such a massive headache away from people. So that's been a great change, where they just solve one single problem, but do it very well. And that's what we're finding. And then we're working on another one, which is an AI chatbot at the moment, for which the benefit of that is you don't have to integrate with software.
Is that Bling? Is it?
That's Bling. And that's that is something that's really exciting coming up soon. So that,
I had a little play with that. It looks
okay. They're the 3
exciting
that are really exciting at the moment.
And Debbie, what do you think? Sort of. I mean, you already mentioned Goodlord before, so
Yeah.
we're going to caveat that one. You can't have that again.
Oh, sorry, I was going to use that one. That really agreeing with Jonathan there in terms of Goodlord made an awful lot of difference on our lettings side. We had quite a paper-driven process there, and we were able to do payments and sign terms, etc., everything, and deliver the whole package to a tenant. I think for the actual group, because I was responsible also for looking things for the group, we've actually brought in the live chat, and we've used managed live chat with Yomdal, and that's worked very well for us because it enabled us to be 24/7. In that, and we did look at, and I looked at, well, do we actually have our own managed live chat, or do we have somebody else do it for us? And the benefits of the 24/7 side of things and it actually being manned has worked really, really well. So, and it's captured a lot of leads of people hitting the website that sometimes drop off and don't come through to us. So we actually found 49% of the clients that were then coming through as an actual lead were brand new clients as well. So you're appealing to a communication channel that your customer wants to use at their convenience as well.
So, Russell, I'm going to hit you with a new question because you sort of already talked about some amazing efficiencies he's got, particularly with the viewing. So I think you've sort of covered that one.
Yeah.
So we'll jump to the next one on here, which is from Charlie. So what does the panel think is the biggest single tech shortfall facing the residential agency sector? That's a nice, easy, light question you've given us there, Charlie. So,
So my view, not to throw a kind of complementary industry under the bus, is conveyancing. So obviously, look, the success of an estate agent is, inarguably really largely linked to the conveyancing process in terms of getting that transaction through to completion. I think that the conveyancing process, I think, is even more broken than the estate agency industry, in my opinion. I think in terms of fixing that, and in fairness to the government, they are trying to, they're certainly talking a good game in terms of looking to fix that in terms of the current improving the home buying and selling process, consultation and call for evidence that's going on. I think if we could get to a position where all of the information that is required for the conveyancer and indeed the estate agent to do their job well, if all of that information was provided at the beginning and in a digitised, centralised form, so whether that be land registry staff, whether it be searches, whether it be leasehold management information, etc., it would transform the home buying and selling process. I think, look, if the government does what it should do, which is to provide that information centrally as an open source proposition, then I think we'll have more people moving. There'll certainly be a lot less wastage. Estate agents wouldn't get the fall through, nor would the conveyancers that they currently do. So I think that's actually the big thing that's missing now from making that whole
I think there's a couple of nice movements
better.
in that space. My Home Move and the partnership as conveyancing operations, they've both developed similar but slightly different transparency sort of tools that actually, I've only seen both of those in the last month, but actually been really impressed with both of them in terms of the transparency they bring to that. But I think you're absolutely right. The sales process in England, if someone can solve that, then maybe start with a freehold cash sale and exponentially take it out of there. John, where do you?
I think the biggest problem for us is the big wall that the software providers put up already. The likes of Repit and Vibra and Despacia, where they will not let you integrate, or on the whole, maybe 90% of what you would like to integrate and have an open API, they just put that barrier up because they're too scared. And they're scared that you're going to go off and you're going to suddenly jump ship when it's absolutely not the case. They are fundamentally squeezing and strangling what agents are trying to do to make this industry a better place just by opening the doors and say, let's work together rather than against. Yeah. So I think that goes to the fact of, someone asked the question, do the likes of Repit and that have a future? They do, but there are people in the background that are working on having these sort of middle solutions that you can then integrate all the other smaller bits and pieces on. Because if you go to one place that does everything, no one wants to do that anymore because things change too quickly. So that's not the future.
And you want to create the suite you want, right? You want to create that tech environment that
put an
that
open
API
and make it friendly, make it user friendly. We'll stay with you longer. We wanted to go to someone like Repit because they wouldn't do it with good Lord. They lost the client. 4,500 properties. They would not do it. So it's frustrating.
Wow. Debbie?
Yeah, actually, as a business, quite a few years ago, we were looking to change our estate agency software. They wouldn't integrate, and so on a letting. So therefore, we built our own. We're a big enough company to be able to do that. That's not feasible for a one-man band or anything like that. But like you say, there may be solutions, coming up later. And we built an API so that we can do that, and we can plug and play and choose what we want to have, rather than be forced down the route of what they want you to have. And I think in this space, it's got to be about collaboration with the things that you want for your business, because otherwise you're all going to be identikit agents, and you don't.
Exactly.
We've
all got to differentiate, right? We can't be the same operation with just a different label on the front.
No.
Cool. So let's stick to the top of the list here. So what would the ideal PropTech solution for customer valuations look like to each of you? Debbie?
Oh, I've not got into that one too much, because our head of marketing does all that side of things. So I'll pass on that one to
Cool.
the other
Russell,
two guys,
you
if
wanna
that's
pick
all
up the
right.
baton on that one?
The ideal solution is people.
Yeah.
And I know it's the wrong thing to say in an environment like this, but I don't think yet anybody has come up with anything, no matter how many data points, no matter how sophisticated the AI is, that can replace a real-life human valuation.
Yeah.
I think there are so many idiosyncrasies now that relate to a valuation, whether it be differences in the physical property itself, individual macro markets, and so on. I think, look, we can all look at, Valpal and Zoopla automated valuation models as a kind of very high-level generic idea, but when it comes to specific valuations, I don't think you can beat proper people that are actually going out looking at a property face to face.
John, you in agreement? I think
100% agree. There's certain, like you said before, Russell, there's certain things we don't want to solve with a PropTech solution, and that human element of gauging what the best practice is, what the best way of getting a good valuation, good price is. You can't, PropTech can't smell a property, or at least it can't yet. Okay.
And the problem with AVMs as well is that there's a delta between what the customer expects, or certainly what they want to market at, versus actually what the true value of that property is. So, the difference between the average price that's listed on Rightmove and actually what prices are achieved by way of the land registry, there's a huge difference. And that's because vendors, and who can blame them, want to try a slightly higher price in the first instance. So if your AVM churns out HM land registry specific data in terms of price achieved, it's going to be, big inverted commas, wrong in terms of what the consumer thinks, certainly insofar as their starting point. So the only way around that is to be face-to-face and talk to the consumer in terms of either, a range of prices or a narrative around, let's try your price, Kristjan, first, and then we'll reduce, as Mr. Dearsley has, and so on, because that's the real world.
Yeah, and as we all know, right, you can have a terrace of Victorian houses, but you can walk through the door of each of those and you can have a property which hasn't barely been touched in 60 years. You can have one that's middle of the road and somebody's done a loft extension and something out the back, and that isn't really captured in the data. So yeah, I think we're all in agreement. The human element still wins out on that side of things, and yeah, long may that last. I think for us agents, quite frankly. So customer reviews. So what do we think? Do these still play a big role in agency, John?
I think they play a massive role in agency, but for our staff and for our management to keep proper track. Is it going to get us more landlords and tenants? We don't think it's getting us that much, but we really love it for keeping an eye on ourselves. So that's where we find the value.
I think it's an essential part of the story, right? I think
100%.
I don't think you can hang. I don't think anyone can hang their hat on reviews anymore. I think when they first came to the fore,
But the problem is it's filtered down now.
Yeah.
Because you've got too many people out there doing reviews, and I mean, I can't tell you how many other PropTech startups that have come to see us that are all also wanting to do this review thing.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if it doesn't come from Rightmove or Zoopla, it's not worth much.
Debbie?
Yeah. We have partnered with FIFO, so we use that. But again, as Jonathan was saying, it's very much about, okay, so we're using it to see how well we're doing, rather than actually necessarily, we put stuff out there, but it's very much about how is our service, where can we change, what do the customers really think, and that's where it's taking the lessons from it, and actually then doing something with it. I think that's the key thing from that side of it.
So for us, the internal measure, which is a good point, we actually use NPS, so Net Promoter Score, which is not so much a consumer-facing thing. For us, reviews are very, very important, particularly as our space seems to have adopted them as being important, so you kind of have to play the game. But of course, reviews, in terms of them having integrity as a kind of a reassurance to the consumer and an acquisition tool, they also have to be genuine. There has to be an integrity to them. And as I think one of your other questions up there is alluding to, some might argue that some companies perhaps have a question mark over that integrity. And I think that's a point well made. So I think whilst reviews are very important, there's definitely a question mark over integrity and credibility insofar as how some of the review sites themselves allow one-star reviews to be buried, for instance. So I think that the review profile is only as good as the integrity of the review companies. But actually, we researched last year, we asked our entire year's listings, how many of them were influenced one way or the other by a review site. So either was it the absolute reason that you dealt with us, or was it at least an influencer in terms of your decision?
I think it possibly plays a slightly stronger relationship in the lettings, because I think for landlords, you're talking about a longer relationship, potentially, whereas sales, it's meant to be once every 8 years, supposedly, or at least in London. Whereas landlords, you're potentially looking at a lifelong or property career-long relationship, and for tenants, again, potentially a longer thing. So yeah. I think review in that space potentially plays a little bit more validity than in the sales market.
I think also the consumer's quite a bit more sophisticated than some might think. So, you know, having a review profile that's very good in one place but not in others, you know, I think screams lack of integrity. And I think what consumers are more inclined to do now, rather than just believing review sites, is to look at a company's social media profile. So, you know, you've only got to look at, I mean, and this doesn't just apply to property, but any vertical where if you really want to know what that company's up to, check its Twitter feed and its Facebook. That will give you an absolute view, kind of warts and all, insofar as what those consumers think of that particular business.
Unless they hide the review section on their social media.
Well, no, you can't do that on Twitter. If someone's slating XYZ company on Twitter, you know, you can't delete somebody else's tweet.
Sure. So I'm glad to see a question come up here about VR, because this sort of leads to something I also wanted to touch on also, about pivoting with solutions. So what is the panel's view on VR as a way to view properties? Will this be the new normality, or does it hinder applicant viewings of properties? So, I mean, I wanted to talk about our experience first. We use iSpy 360, who are here today, and we use that actually across all of our marketing. Every sales and lettings listings we do gets a virtual tour. Truth be told, from our personal experience, we're struggling to see user engagement from that from a tenant perspective. It's a nice marketing tool to say to our landlords that we do it. But until Rightmove and Zoopla really recognise that as a format and put it as a sort of front and centre content on there at the moment, I think Rightmove, you get a funny little link almost with the text at the bottom. So unless you've got a user really actively looking for that, I think that's one of the sort of big hurdles at the moment for VR is getting the major portals to really put that content front and centre. But for us, and I'd like to hear from you guys as well, in a similar vein, if you've seen things pivot. We approached VR very much for that purpose, marketing. But what we then decided to do was we go out and inspect our managed portfolio. Each property gets inspected 3 times a year. Again, as I said, a lot of our clients live abroad, and actually a lot of the properties we manage are former homes. So there's a slightly more emotional connection with that property than your typical cold investment. And we now shoot virtual tour inspections. They still get their 3 or 4 page report with photos, but we now shoot a tour on that inspection and we embed that in the link. And that, for us, has got phenomenal uptake. You know, we've seen our landlords absolutely love that. And we approached it as a marketing tool, but actually as a sort of information insight tool for our landlords. That's where we've seen the big win on that one. So go through you guys sort of thoughts on VR, but also not necessarily VR, if there's been another product where you've sort of approached it from one viewpoint and then found that it's maybe benefited you in a different way than you expected.
So the VR itself is way too expensive. It's a gimmick. It's not needed in the lettings market. It's not financially viable. The headset, once you start playing with the headset, some people feel sick, some people don't. It's beautiful, it's very impressive, but by the time you've messed about with all that, you've let the flat if you're a half-decent agent. When it comes to sales, if you're taking on a load of sales, it's expensive. If you're a developer and it's off-plan, great, it works really well, it's financially viable. What we're working on and what we're looking at the moment and trialing is giving, it's actually a company in Israel that we're working with, and they have, you send them the plan and they come back with a 3D model in a quick way that you can then furnish and make it nice yourself in a very quick digital way, but more importantly, cheaply. So if you want to impress a landlord, you want to do something a bit super smart, then you've got a chance. But Otherwise, it just is not financially viable for us.
And is there a product outside of VR that you've maybe approached with a view of it benefiting you one way and you've found it's benefited the business in a different way? I mean, maybe not, but...
Yeah, I mean, Key Nest we use to hold keys for certain properties if we wanted to, if we didn't hold the property in the office. And then we pivoted and helped them develop a model where actually we can now log our keys in and out using a mobile phone, so it's completely separate.
Right.
So that wasn't intended at the beginning, but we came to develop that. We got involved with a company called Get Renter that we actually invested in. They came to us for HMO and licensing opportunities. We've now pivoted with them to actually develop an automatic licensing form filler, which, as everyone knows, is an absolute nightmare. You know, if you're lucky to do it in an hour each one. So a lot of people come to us and then we actually say, well, actually, how about if we did this, this and this? So it goes back to that question originally at the beginning to say how best to deal with PropTech companies. Just get them in, engage with them, come and sit in your office and see what they do. And then you've got more experience with them most of the time.
So Debbie, VR?
We're still really early days at the moment with that. And again, as like Jonathan said, it's very much about, there is a cost, you know, to it. But I think where we could see and making a difference is that where you could see the savings is on cutting down on the amount of first viewings.
Yeah.
So, but again, until such time as Rightmove and Zoopla make it easier for that to be seen, then it's going to be very difficult for us to justify actually doing that. But I think that's where we could actually see that side of things. And I know from a personal experience, if I could have actually done some viewing, you know, working long hours, people aren't, you can't always do those viewings later. People don't offer that. So if I could sit there in my own time, do some viewings, then I can close down on a couple of the properties that I don't want to go and see, and then go and see those ones that I do and make the time for.
And have you guys seen a pivot on something that you've brought in and it's not necessarily pivoted, but you've just seen it benefit the business in a sort of unexpected way, or?
Probably actually when we've used sort of utility switching or sort of providers to switch the services for us on the letting side of the business, and when we were reviewing that, we changed to home shift, because also what we could do was offer the service for our sales guys, whereas everybody else that was offering that service would just for the lettings business. So actually, when we looked at reviewing what we were doing in that space, it was actually seeing that somebody else had something else that we could then offer those. And whilst we don't get quite as much take up in the sales side, there's still quite a few people that do take it up. So, and it's a free added value service for the vendors and purchasers, but also we can earn some revenue off the back of it as well.
Russell, any plans for VR?
No, I'm not a big fan, I have to be honest. I think that VR's actually been around for quite a while. I think there's been lots of attempts to try and make it take off in the property space. I just don't think it has. I do think there's an element where it actually shortchanges the agent, as the question alludes to really, which I think is spot on, that a lot of vendors expect to see physical viewings, and that's their way of kind of justifying your existence as an agent. So therefore, you know, if people are simply downloading and looking at VR instead of viewing, I just don't think it's a justifiable substitute. People actually want to see that your work in terms of getting people around to the property. And of course, look, it's not the same, is it? You know, looking at a screen versus actually being in the property.
I don't think it's ever going to replace the physical viewing. But.
No, but I think there is a danger that VR potentially could mitigate those viewings. And I guess my point is that, you know, even if there's 10 viewings and 8 of them are from people that instantly say that they're not interested, and thereby they could have been filtered out through VR, the seller still wants to see those 10 viewings because it is a measure of how hard you're working for them as an agent.
Right. So I think we're in the last minute or 30 seconds. So there's sort of one thing which John just touched on about how you've sort of helped companies that came to you. I think one really important thing that I've found, which has sort of surprised me as a small agency, is about how you as an agency interact with your PropTech. And it is, I think a lot of agents mistake it as a one-way relationship, in that they're given a product and you take that product and you use it as it is provided. I think that's a massive misunderstanding. I think that you need to make sure you have a really good open dialogue with any PropTech solution you're looking at or any PropTech solution that you're using. Any company providing a product to you wants that product to be, where possible, everything that you want it to be. And they want your specific insight to build the next features and functions that you want. So the one thing I would say, hopefully as a takeaway from this, is on that journey, don't underestimate your value, whether you're 5-person single office or a huge corporate. Do not underestimate the value in the voice that you have, that you can help educate the companies that you're working with to develop the products that you really want. But I think we're out of time, guys. So thanks a lot for having a chat.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed it.